Hi there and welcome back for another episode of Make It Monday here on Papertrey Ink. This is Betsy Veldman and I'll be hosting the challenge this week. And I'm going to be showing you how to take your Papertrey Ink die cut sentiments and give them a 3D effect. So let's get started. So I'm starting off with a 4 by 5¼ inch piece of berry sorbet cardstock. And I'm going to be die cutting the word birthday from this cardstock. This die is from the Birthday Trio die collection, and I'm going to die cut that at an angle. I prepared my cardstock ahead of time with some adhesive. This is an adhesive sheet by Scrapbook Adhesives. It's just going to make working with some of the smaller pieces from the die cut, it's a little easier to adhere to our card once we get to that step. Alright, so I'm going to position that at an angle and secure it with a post-it note, and I'll run that through my machine and be right back. Alright, my die cutting is finished, so I can go ahead and take my post-it note off. I'm going to pull my die away from my die cut, and I want to be careful that I keep all of the little pieces. We're going to be using all of the negative portions of the die cut. We are actually not going to use the word birthday itself from the berry sorbet. I'm going to cut another one of those from white cardstock in a little bit here. So I'm just going to pull that out of there and set that aside. Then I also need to pull out all of these little bits and pieces. Sometimes they're a little tricky to get out of there, so I like to use a pin. I'm just going to put these back right inside of there so I know what goes where. Avoid some confusion later on when I'm looking for all of these little bits and pieces. Alright, so we'll put that aside, and we'll put our die cuts aside also. Alright, we are going to be working with this piece right now, and I'm taking a Copic marker. This is R24, which is actually from the Pure Poppy trio, available on the Papertrey Ink website. It's a good complement for the berry sorbet cardstock. You want to choose a Copic that is just a shade darker than the cardstock that you're working with. And I'm going to start off here with my clear ruler, and you can see how I've positioned that at an angle, and I'm going to just draw a line straight down from the widest part of the bottom of that B down at an angle to the bottom of my cardstock. And I'm going to do that same thing at kind of the intersection of all of those letters in the word birthday, making sure to keep all of my lines parallel to that first line that I drew when I started out. So I'm just going to continue. Here you can see now I'm moving on. I'm going to catch the bottom left corner of the T and just continue on that same manner. Just catching the bottom corner of all of those letters. Again, just being sure that all of the lines are parallel to each other, otherwise the effect is going to be lost. Alright. At the end of my word here, I'm going to catch the bottom of that Y and then move up. Sorry, I kind of went off screen here. Move up and catch the top of the Y. And now I'm going to go back to the beginning of the word, and I'm going to do the same thing again, this time catching only the top right corner of all of the letters. There's the B. Now I'm going to move on and do the I. And same thing, just making sure the lines stay parallel and catching all of the high points right hand side of each of those letters. I'm going to catch that right hand top corner of the T, and then again moving over here to the top right corner of the H. And here the same thing with the D and the Y. Okay. So then I'm going to go back and I'm going to take the wide tip of the same Copic marker and I'm going to go back and I'm going to add just a little more depth to some of those areas. Almost like it would be, think of it in 3D, the light coming from the one side and shining over, you're going to get kind of a shadow on what would be the left hand side of each of the letters. And that is what's going to give you a little more depth and make the effect a little more realistic. And then I'm going to just shade, I'll just do this by hand, by freehand here, the entire side of the Y. Okay, and then also using the chisel tip of the Copic, I'm going to start at the bottom of the B and keeping the tip of the marker, don't turn the tip, just keep it straight, and I'm going to follow along the bottom edge of all of those letters to kind of create another bit of a shadow effect. Alright, and then I'm going to switch back to my brush tip and I'm going to go in and all of the lines that we drew out from the top corners, I'm going to shade in just that portion from the line down to the bottom of the die cut. This is going to be our guide when we're trimming this out in a little bit. Okay, so our shading is finished. Now we're going to move on to cutting it apart and piecing it back together. So I'm going to take a scissors and the first thing I'm going to do is cut along this, the outermost lines on both the right side and the left side. So I'm going to start with the Y and cut on that furthest line, and then I'll move over to the B, and following my very first line I drew, I'm going to go ahead and cut along that line also. So that is going to be our kind of 3D effect. And this top portion, we're going to need that later, so I'm just going to set that aside. Alright, so here I have a panel of Aqua Mist cardstock. This is a 4 by 5 1/4 inch panel. And we're going to adhere this three-dimensional effect here to the lower right corner, lining up that 90-degree angle at the bottom with our panel. Just add a little more adhesive to the bottom here. And I should probably flip that around so I don't have my measurements on the front. So I'm going to adhere that, just lining up that bottom right angle, right corner there. And there we go. Alright, now I have the same birthday die cut, which I cut out of white cardstock prior to starting the video here, just to speed things along a little bit. And I did the same thing. I used the adhesive sheet on the back of the cardstock before I die cut it. You can definitely just do it by hand also with a little glue pen or whatever is your favorite method. I'm going to just fit that right inside of the die cut. It will line up perfectly. It's the beauty of die cuts. Just nestle that right in there. I have the dot of my eye, which I'm going to add in a little bit, so I'll just leave that there. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take all of these areas that we shaded, remember the lines that we drew up from the top corners of the letters, I'm going to go ahead and trim those along the line that I drew, and that's going to create that shadow effect up from the top of the letters also. And I'll just fit those back into position. This gets a little tedious, but it's not too bad. The effect is pretty cool. So I'm just going to continue on. This is the shadow for the eye, which I'm going to nestle right back in place, and then I can go ahead and add the dot of my eye. Okay, and I'll just add that. It's kind of a toss-up as to whether the adhesive sheet is making this easier or a little more difficult. Backing is a little tricky to pull off of those tiny pieces. I might have been better off with just a glue pen, but you can see what works better for you. Now I'm just going to continue on doing the same thing for the rest of the word with all of those little pieces from the top. I think those little bits and pieces up at the top with the shadow effect is really what makes this effective. It's a little tedious, but I think it's worth it. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and grab that die cut again that we had set aside earlier, and I'm going to go ahead and add all of the negative portions of the letters out of the berry sorbet. Add the center to the D and the A, and also there's a small space there in between the A and the Y. This is why I said I should put these where they are supposed to go so I can avoid confusion later, because these little pieces all start to look the same. Okay, so that finishes off the 3D effect. Pretty cool. I had a lot of fun playing around with this. Alright, so now I'm going to go and I have a happy birthday stamp. This is from the Stylish Sentiments birthday set, and it's this happy birthday in just kind of a really simple font. Nice contrast to my scripted birthday, and I'm just going to ink up the happy portion of the sentiment with some Versamark and stamp that right up atop of my birthday, and I'm going to sprinkle it with white embossing powder and emboss that. Okay, our embossing is finished. Now we're going to do a little bit of embellishing. I have some stars which I die cut from vellum and stamped with one of the bitty background blocks from the original set, the first set, and heat emboss those with some gold embossing powder. Going to just adhere a couple of those. The stars were die cut using the Seeing Stars dies. And then I'll add just a little enamel dot to the center of each star. And then I have some tiny gold stars which I cut using the Stargazer dies. I'm just going to sprinkle those around. I'll put a few dots of adhesive scattered here and there. I'm going to use my Quick Stick tool. This is a Quick Cuts tool. It's really slick for picking up little tiny pieces like these stars. It has a sticky end on it, and I can just grab them with that and dab them right into my adhesive. I'm I'm going to add a few more down here in our 3D effect down here. So that finishes off our front panel, and all we have left is to adhere that to a card base. I have a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch white cardstock base. So I'll just add some adhesive to that and put that finished panel right on the front. And that wraps up our 3D effect. You could do this with really any of the die cut sentiments from Papertrey Ink. You could also play around with using this technique on some of the image die cuts. That might be cool as well. So yeah, have fun with it, play around with it. I can't wait to see what you do with it in your projects this week. Thanks for joining me. This has been Betsy Veldman for Papertrey Ink. Have a great week, everybody.